The morning sun filtered softly through the fine linen curtains of Dr. Ricardo Almeida's office, creating faint patterns on the Persian rug beneath his desk. The room was meticulously organized, with books on psychology and history arranged on dark wood shelves, and a comfortable leather chair in front of the desk, where Dr. Almeida usually received his patient. The door opened softly, and a middle-aged man entered. His posture was rigid, and his eyes, hidden behind dark glasses, conveyed a mixture of distrust and despair. He was dressed in an old-fashioned gray suit and tie that seemed out of place in the modern setting of the office. "Good morning, sir," Dr. Almeida said, rising to greet him. "I am Dr. Ricardo Almeida. Please have a seat." The man hesitated for a moment before settling into the chair across from the psychiatrist. He slowly removed his sunglasses, revealing clear, piercing eyes that seemed to carry a weight from another time. "I am Edmund Hartley," the man said with a distinct, formal accent, "and I need your help." Dr. Almeida watched intently as Edmund began to tell his story. The tale was surreal, shrouded in an aura of mystery and anguish. Edmund claimed to be a man from the 19th century, transported to the present in an inexplicable way. "I realize it sounds crazy," Edmund said, "but it is not a question of sanity. I remember a time and a place that does not correspond to this world. I was a British aristocrat, and now I am here, in an era I do not recognize." Dr. Almeida took careful notes as Edmund continued. The patient spoke in vivid detail about a life of luxury, but also about a tragic event that, according to him, had caused his time travel. "What's most disturbing," Edmund continued, "is that I am somehow privy to historical details that could not be known to anyone outside of that period." The psychiatrist knew that tackling a case like this could be a challenge, but something about Edmund's candor and the way he described his experience made Dr. Almeida feel compelled to investigate further. Following weeks were filled with intensive sessions. Dr. Almeida used a combination of therapeutic and investigative techniques to explore Edmund's claim in depth. During these sessions, the psychiatrist began to notice small details that made Edmund's case seem more convincing. Edmund spoke of historical events with a precision that surprised Dr. Almeida. His detailed descriptions of ceremonies, fashion, and language were so accurate that the psychiatrist began to research the details Edmund mentioned. However, as the therapy progressed, Dr. Almeida began to experience strange coincidences. One rainy morning, he found an old auction ledger from the 1800s at the local library that contained an item Edmund had mentioned. Coincidence was too much to ignore. During one particularly intense session, Edmund began to talk about a strange feeling that he was being followed, and the psychiatrist noticed a change in Edmund's expression, which now seemed more distressed and paranoid. "I feel like something is lurking, waiting to get me," Edmund said in a shaky voice, "as if the past is pulling me back." Dr. Almeida felt a growing sense of unease and disorientation. His own thoughts were beginning to blur with Edmund's narrative. He realized that the line between reality and illusion was becoming increasingly blurred. Edmund's emotional state seemed to be deteriorating rapidly. During one of his sessions, he revealed disturbing details about a possible traitor in his past life, someone he claimed was manipulating events to bring him back to his own time. "I feel like time is distorting around me," Edmund said, "like I'm being pulled into a timeline that I can't control." Dr. Almeida's concern grew. He began to question the validity of his own thoughts and judgments. The information about Edmund became intertwined with his own perceptions of reality. At night, the psychiatrist would find himself obsessively reviewing historical records and Edmund's accounts, trying to find a logical explanation for everything that was happening. In a moment of desperation, Dr. Almeida decided to perform a hypnosis session on Edmund, hoping to access deeper layers of the patient's psyche and better understand his claims. While under hypnosis, Edmund reported disturbing visions of a dark and distorted future, where he seemed to be the only survivor of a cataclysm. "I see the city in ruins," Edmund said in a voice that seemed far away. "I see people struggling to survive in a world I don't know. I see my own corpse, as if it were trying to communicate with me." These visions left Dr. Almeida disturbed. He began to have nightmares about similar scenarios, and the line between reality and fantasy seemed to be blurring. As the treatment progressed, Edmund made a revelation that shook Dr. Almeida. He claimed to have uncovered a secret conspiracy that, he said, was manipulating time to alter history. "There is a group," Edmund said with fervent intensity. "They have the power to alter historical events to serve their own interests. I am here because they brought me back to correct something they have done wrong." Dr. Almeida was in a state of increasing confusion. He began to question whether there was any truth to Edmund's claims, or whether he was, in fact, being manipulated by his patient himself. The evidence of a conspiracy seemed unlikely, but Edmund's claims were beginning to shake the psychiatrist's confidence in his own sanity. One night, as Dr. Almeida was reviewing the records and notes on the case, he came across an old diary that Edmund had mentioned. The diary contained entries that precisely matched Edmund's descriptions of historical events. The sense of disorientation grew. Dr. Almeida decided to confront Edmund about the inconsistencies he had found. During a final session, he challenged Edmund to explain the discrepancy between his accounts and known historical facts. "Is there something you haven't told me?" Dr. Almeida asked with a tone of determination. Edmund looked momentarily surprised, but then an enigmatic smile formed on his lips. "Maybe I got ahead of myself," Edmund said calmly. "Or maybe you're closer to the truth than you think." The psychiatrist felt a wave of frustration and fear. He felt he was on the verge of discovering the truth, but the answers always seemed to elude his grasp. Edmund, now calmer, began to talk about a secret that, according to him, had been hidden from the beginning. "The real reason I'm here," Edmund said, "is because you are connected to this enigma in a way you haven't yet understood. There's a reason you were chosen to hear my story." Dr. Almeida was astonished. He didn't know if he was being manipulated or if there was something deeper and more sinister at play. The patient stood up, grabbed his hat, and headed for the door. "You must find the truth for yourself," Edmund said before leaving. "And remember, the line between sanity and madness can be thinner than you think." Edmund's departure left Dr. Almeida devastated. The psychiatrist was now in a state of total confusion. He couldn't distinguish between what was real and what was the fruit of his own disturbed mind. A few weeks later, Dr. Almeida was found in his office, sitting in the same chair where he used to receive Edmund. His face was blank, and beside him was a pile of books and documents on history and psychology. The psychiatrist seemed to be lost in his thought. With a distant look that reflected the emptiness of his mind, Edmund's records had disappeared, and there was no trace of the patient or his history. Dr. Almeida was alone, his mind dazed and his perception of reality questioned. The office was silent, except for the occasional rustling of the pages of the books, as if they were whispering ancient secrets. Final question remained unanswered. Was Edmund really a time traveler or a manifestation of a disturbed mind? And, most importantly, had Dr. Almeida managed to find the truth, or was he trapped in an endless illusion? The mystery of Edmund Hartley, patient number 9, would continue to haunt the psychiatrist's mind, like a distorted reflection of an enigma that might never be solved.